Now to Juliane. First of all, we know each other for quite some time. We met for the first time in 2017. I was also partly teaching for Lie Detectors. This is for transparency reasons. I would like to mention that. So we met the first time in 2017. And back then, Juliane was starting to build up the NGO Lie Detectors. Before that, she used to work as a journalist. She worked for the Wall Street Journal, for Newsweek, for Spiegel Online, and for others. And then she started with Lie Detectors. And I think Lie Detectors is probably the most prominent NGO teaching media literacy in Europe. Lie Detectors provides hundreds and hundreds of lessons in school classes in Belgium, in Germany, and also in Austria. Besides that, Juliane also advises politics and politicians. She does that as a member of the high-level groups for disinformation and also the high-level group for media literacy. There she advises, for instance, the European Commission. Juliane won several awards for her journalistic work, but also for the impact of her NGO. And now she's for the first time in our Understanding Media seminar, and I would warmly welcome her. Juliane, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this lovely invitation and very nice introduction. I can tell you that we've added a few more countries since you were working with us, Lutz. We're now also in Poland, Switzerland. It started in Italy, and next year we're in Croatia. So, yes, since I had this idea at my kitchen table, and thought that I would be able to do this while continuing as a journalist and do it part-time, quite a few things have changed. So I'm happy to tell you about that. So Lutz has told me a little bit about you as a group, and you're quite diverse. I understand that some of you are studying economics and maybe some law students and all sorts of different studies, and then also the students from Ukraine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you quite generally about our work at Lie Detectors and what we do, why we do it this way, what we have found, what we see as being the priorities coming up also within a regulatory context from an EU level. And then maybe we can just open it up to a discussion. And I'm really looking forward to your comments and your questions. I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to share it fully because I want to be able to see you as well. So I hope that you'll bear with me if I share it like this. And I'll speak for about 15 minutes, something like that. Oh, I need permission to share my screen.
I'll take care of this. Hold on.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe then, Johannes, you have to activate the co-host role for Juliane as well. Sorry, I thought that was automatically here given. But, yeah,
there should be
able.
Got it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yes, there it is. So I'm going to share my whole desktop and I hope this works. You're going to have to tell me, give me a thumbs up if you can see this. Oh, allow. Oh. Let's hope this works. Does it work?
Not yet. No.
Okay.
Not yet.
Hang on. Oh, this is interesting. It looks different. I've just had an upgrade. Oh. Oh. Share sound. That's on. That's already a good sign. Oh dear. Ah. Okay, hold on a second. Let me try again. This is strange. Something's changed about the way it's asking me to share things. Documents, screens, desktop 1, desktop 2. Allow. Allow software. Oh. Zoom. There we go. Let's hope that that works. Hang on. LD. Why don't we have an... Ah, I might have to... Let me see if this works without quitting out of this. And I'll try one more time. It could be that... It might be that I have to... Ah, one participant. Yes, this looks good. That looks good. Okay, I think we're there. I think.
Yeah.
So, oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay.
Excellent.
It's asking me all sorts of questions. It literally just now, a few seconds before I joined your call, it somehow updated. So, allow for 1 month. There we go. That's fine. I think that'll be fine. So you can see that, right? So, great. So as Lutz said, Lie Detectors is an independent and philanthropically funded media literacy organization. You're right that we're probably Europe's largest by now. We were only founded, I came up with this idea back in 2016 and found the funding for it for a test drive back in 2017, and we started our first strategic plan in 2018. We've been extraordinarily lucky with our funding, which we get from mostly from a nature conservation foundation called the WIS Foundation, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. And they very, very presciently back in 2017 saw this connection between erosion of trust in facts, erosion of trust in media, erosion of trust in science, and therefore threats to effective climate change policy. And so we've been very, very lucky to have people, teachers. We work with hundreds of journalists. I'll show you the numbers in a minute. And we really see our work as as creating a virtuous circle, where we're trying to address the two sides that we see in disinformation and polarization. And we see disinformation and polarization happening, really being driven by two things, demand and supply. From our perspective, the demand, that is us, the citizens who click on the stuff and perpetuate it and demand it and want it and consume it. And for us, supply is not just the idea of online actors from Russia or China, which I know many people are very focused on, and that's an important focus. But we really concentrate when we think about supply on the drivers of disinformation, the systemic drivers of disinformation. And by that, we mean the large online platforms, particularly their business models, their advertising revenue business models, and the way that perpetuates and exacerbates harmful disinformation and polarizing content. We see the second of those, supply, as being the harder to tackle because there's so much money involved and so much political interest involved. And so we also work an awful lot, and we're probably best known for our work on the demand side, on working with why people click on it, why do people want it, what can we do to make them understand it better, and actually, in the end, simply slow down and engage system two when deciding what is real and not online. So you can see from the circle. So what we do is we train and send journalists into classrooms to work with children aged 10 to 15, to learn about what we call the yin and yang of media literacy. That means not only teaching them about what's harmful online and how to spot it and what to do about it, but also to really understand that there is valuable information out there, and that there's a real sense and value in seeking it out. We've organically started training teachers. Teachers really only trust other teachers, and they also trust their children. And so when they see us doing our work in the classroom, they have organically begun asking us to train them as well. And we do more and more of that. The findings that we get from the classroom visits and the work with teachers, we collect, we analyze with the help of academics, and then we feed that insight into policy advisory processes, often at the EU level, as Lutz was saying. And this is what a classroom visit can look like. You can see we go to a gigantically diverse range of classrooms. So some of these photos were taken during the pandemic when people were working from their home schoolroom, I guess. And so you can see some kids, are in classrooms that are incredibly well kitted out. Down here at the bottom, you can see children in schools where they all had their independent screens, or very wonderful, great screens with spider mics and all sorts of things. But we also, when you look in the middle, we also go into classrooms that are quite different, where there might be no internet connection whatsoever, no projector, no way of working in a digital way on this very digital subject. So we have to really work in an analog way and very imaginatively. And thankfully, the way we've done it and the fact that we're working with journalists who really have some skin in the game, they really care. It's also about their own credibility and their own sustainability. Means that we've grown really quickly. We've trained more than, by now, actually, some of these numbers are a bit old. They're from 2023. By now, we've trained more than 500 journalists. We go into more than 1,300 individual classrooms every year. You just have to imagine what a gigantic logistical machine that is. We work in several languages. As I said, we are present and have country operations in several countries, and we also work online, particularly with teachers who like to work online more than they like to travel to a seminar, because they often have to do this in their own time. And you have to imagine then when we walk into a classroom, the children tell us what they care about, and they tell us, this is from this is a survey that we did during the pandemic, when we asked them, what is it that you worry about, and they tell us things that don't change very much. They care about, well, conspiracy theories were a big issue during the pandemic. They always care about chain letters. What do you do about them? How do you know? What are you supposed to do about them? Why does fake news exist? What can you do about it? How do you spot it? And more, in fact, some of the conversation that we're having with them is about algorithms, because if you think about, since we have existed, the big themes that have been coming up have been refugees, immigration, followed by the pandemic in 2020, followed by Ukraine in 2022, and now, to a lesser extent, Gaza and Israel, because children of that age don't tend to actually talk about that very much. But increasingly, what we're seeing that is problematic in the classroom is not just the false information that they are receiving on their various social media feeds, but the fact that these streams of information are so pixelated and so tailored to their own preferences that even within one classroom you can have 20 different versions of the world. And this is something that we are addressing increasingly. I'm going to show you a little video of what the journalists say that go into classrooms. Ignore the promo music. Just focus on what the students have to say, and I hope the sound works. Hang on, let me see. It's only 2 minutes long. Hold on. Does it work? Can you hear? You can't hear?
No.
Oh,
It's not.
how do I do that? Is there anybody who knows how I can do that? I don't really want to show it to you without sound.
You had to change it in your Zoom settings.
Hold on. Let me try again.
Like there in audio, you have to
Share sound. Got it.
Yes.
I think I got it.
Thank you.
There we go. I think I have it. Let me try again. Oh. Can you hear it?
No, we lost this.
No.
We lost the shared screen.
Oh, I have not shared.
No, you're not shared. No.
Oh, there's a problem. Hold on a second. Whoop, whoop. Oh, please install the audio Zoom device. Oh, let's see if I can do this. I might not be able to show you this. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, let me try one more time. If it doesn't work this time around, then I'm going to abandon it. Hold on. Let's try.
Perfect.
Yeah, I never hear it.
very nervous, which doesn't make sense because I'm a television journalist.
I was really frightened, yeah.
What if I don't know the answer? What will they think about me?
Right after, I felt relieved.
I felt really uplifted, like we can really make a difference in here.
And the kids are really proud of having found out things. So teachers are often wondering, how come the kids know this?
It was great to see how the pupils absorbed the content.
There is no way of protecting them from ever getting in touch with fake news. They have a phone, they have social media, so they will get in touch with it at some point.
I just think it's so important to help kids, to help teachers understand how to navigate this complicated information world.
I feel more optimistic about the fact that you can really change things and about the power of social media, because if you give children the right tools, if you teach people how to use them, then it can change everything.
We're just planting little seeds in their heads. Check it out, trust yourself.
So, and this is all wonderful. And we're very happy to have these wonderful journalists working with us. Some of them have been with us for years now and going into dozens. One of them actually recently went into a 100th classroom visit. But we also really are very interested in creating systemic change and in encouraging newsrooms to really take this on as part of their own part of their own mandate, because we think that in a world where we are all putting together our own newscast at the end of the day, and everybody is deciding what the news agenda is for themselves every day, everybody does need those critical journalistic tools and that very basic news judgment. And we really advocate increasingly that, part of the public service mandate of a journalist must be not just gathering information and presenting it, but also teaching people how to gather information and present it for themselves. And we're really happy that several newsrooms agree with us on this, and we are increasingly working directly with newsrooms, not just with with independent journalists. So you can see here various logos. A lot of them are German. For some reason, we've been particularly successful in this in Germany, but also the European Broadcasting Union, La Libre Belgique, and various others. But really, beyond that, also, we see critical media literacy, this ability to check a fact, gauge the veracity of a source, build knowledge, triangulate information, assess the information, and build knowledge from that. We really see that as being something that needs to be taught in schools, and not just by an organization like Lie Detectors, which is philanthropically funded for now. This is not something that should be charitable work. This is something that belongs right into the classroom. And we see media literacy as belonging into every school curriculum and every teacher training curriculum, just like reading and writing and counting. And so the good news is that we ask teachers whether they agree, and they do. Increasingly, there's been, particularly since the pandemic, they've really realized that this belongs into their own subject area. We work with all sorts of teachers, maths teachers, biology teachers, general language teachers, etc. And you can see from the green here, these are the green are the people that are the teachers who tell us that these various parts of media literacy are important or very important for students to learn in the classroom. So that's a really positive development. However, when we tell them, when we then ask them, well, you think it's so important, do you talk about it in your own classroom? The reality is quite different. You can see the green and the blue very, very tiny over there on the right. You can see a lot of red and orange, and those are the teachers who tell us that they teach it less than once a month or never. So that's quite a difference, right? And what we really want to do is fill that gap, the gap between what they think should happen and what they feel capable of doing themselves. When we ask them, how come you're not acting on your interest, they tell us usually the three top things, always over and over again. Number one, they don't have time. There's no time in the curriculum. Number two, they don't get a reward if they do manage to somehow crowbar time into their curriculum and get informed and find the materials and teach it. Nobody thanks them for it. And number three, really interestingly, is they just say that they don't quite dare to broach the subject because it can be one that becomes tricky and risky. Even, I don't know how many of you know about what happened in France when a teacher decided to talk about Charlie Hebdo, which is a satirical newspaper in France, and he ended up being stabbed and killed by the father of one of the children that was in the classroom. So there's a very real concern among the teachers that there are issues here that could open a real wasp's nest, a real hornet's nest that really could be quite worrying and even dangerous for them. And the other reason that it's also frightening for them, not frightening, I don't want to use too big a word, but even if they're not worried about something as drastic as, being physically hurt, they do worry about not understanding this universe. And when we ask them where they get their news, this is what the teachers tell us, where they go when they go on social media platforms to find information. You're quite young. I should actually ask you. I should do a survey, but I don't quite dare because I don't know how much time we have. Maybe we can do it later. Where do you get, when you go on social media, where do you get your news? So we ask the teachers this and they tell us very predictably, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, a little bit of TikTok, Signal. When we ask the students, you can see that they are on a lot more of the platforms, and wherever you see this orange quite alone, unaccompanied by a green, this is where they're alone, right? They're much more on YouTube. They are massively on TikTok. They're on Snapchat, almost completely alone. They're alone when they inform themselves on Discord, Fortnite, Twitch. And we did this in 2022. By now, there's even more platforms that have added to that. And there's a few things that are important about this. Number one, they are alone, right? They're unaccompanied. And number two, they're alone on platforms that are largely visual and encrypted. And that means that any kind of moderation by AI or by fact checkers is really difficult, if not impossible. How are you going to get onto a Fortnite channel and monitor what's being said and chatted about while the children are playing? And all of that kind of reinforces our view that children really need these tools by themselves because they are informing themselves by, individually and alone about the world. And number two, it really shows just quite how difficult it can be for the teachers to broach a subject where they really are in a different world from the children. But it can be done, and this is why we work increasingly with training teachers just to take away a little bit of their fear, because we do know from our own anecdotal evidence that once a teacher feels empowered and safe to talk about this, that's a classroom we no longer need to go into. So I want to talk to you a little bit more now about the other side, the supply side, and then I want to open it up for discussion. So as you know, we work with feedback forms. These are for internal quality control and, making sure that everything's going the way it should be. Is our work as effective in Poland as it is in Austria, for instance? It's a nightmare because we have to be GDPR compliant. That's privacy protections, and therefore the children are not allowed to leave a digital footprint. And you can see from this photo just the gigantic stacks of of pieces of paper that we get and have to read and input. But it's really worth it. And we work with lots of different academics. We work with media psychologists. We work with cognitive psychologists. We work with neuroscientists, very much trying to keep up with the very, very new and developing insights that we're getting about why does disinformation lodge itself in our brains the way it does, and what can we do about it? And with that information, like as Lutz said, we go and work in different advisory settings. And sometimes we have to work quite hard, I have to say, because to say something like you cannot rely on fact checking is quite radical. It might not seem radical to you, but it is, because there's a lot of money riding on fact checking being the good thing to do. It's measurable. You can imagine the wonderful headline, right? Under pressure from, let's say, Ursula von der Leyen, Meta doubles its anti-fake news war room and deletes 1 million posts or something like that, right? Everybody's stock goes up, right? Ursula von der Leyen's stock goes up, so does Meta's stock, and any organization that's helping with the fact-checking. The problem, however, remains unsolved. As we know, fact-checking won't solve it, but it's not a very popular thing to say. The other thing that's not very popular to say is that actually what people need to be doing is breathing a little and working a little bit more slowly with their screens, and that actually is also radical, because it really goes against the interests of some rather powerful companies. So we've had to work in this, there was the 2021 to 2022 expert group. We worked very hard to build in this issue, this idea that if you're going to be transmitting digital media literacy skills to citizens, they also need to understand algorithms and how algorithms function, and why we receive the information that we receive, not only whether the information is correct or not. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what's going on in Brussels. I mean, in the whole world, there have been a lot of elections. In Brussels, there were also elections. We have a new setup of commissioners coming into the European Commission. Forgive me, I don't know whether you know all about this or nothing, so I'm just going to say it quite simply. I think what's going to be really interesting is various pieces of draft legislation and guidelines and directives that are coming across the horizon. There will probably be something called an Online Advertising Act. That's going to hurt a lot of people. If you start thinking about online advertising, you're not only talking about an impact on traditional advertisers, but also on platforms and also on politicians. And we're going to be relying on politicians to drive this forward. However, we do see attention to the advertising revenue business model of the platforms as being absolutely key in addressing the proliferation of disinformation and polarizing content. I do see a lot more attention on the algorithms that's going to happen as the Digital Services Act really comes into force, and we really start looking at how good is the code of practice. Again, this is very technical. I don't know how much you know about this, but I'm just going to tell you anyway, in case you do know about it. The Digital Markets Act is going to come to maturity, and there's going to be a more attention paid on what the consumer harms may be of this content in the new definition of competition law at a European level. There's a lot of talk of reopening something called the e-commerce directive. That's to do with creative copyright, etc., especially with the advent of very broad use of AI. There's something called the Defense of Democracy package, and something that I have not actually put in here on my little list of bullet points is the issue of health. I think this is enormously important. Health and the interests of the World Health Organization are things that are really coming across the horizon. So back in 2016, the World Health Organization, for the first time, designated online gambling addiction as a medical condition. And that's really radical. And everything else has been following slowly, right? And the World Health Organization very recently released a report about the addictive qualities of social media consumption and the effect of that on the mental health of young people. And that's also really very radical. When we go into conferences, often we're in conferences with teachers, with education people, with tech platforms, often with people from the military. When you're talking about, when you've got people from, well, I mean, I don't have to tell the Ukrainian students about this, right? Why there would be people from, the Defense Department and the military there, but also increasingly health officials, just because this is beginning to be seen as a health crisis, as a public health crisis, and you can imagine that there's going to be a lot of resistance to that taking hold. I'm just going to show you a couple of the kind of recommendations that we tend to make when we are in policy settings. As I said, we advocate for media literacy to be seen as a core literacy alongside reading and writing. We urge for all the members of the OECD to really support the OECD as it's trying to build digital literacy into the school rankings gauges. I don't know how much you know about that, but that's actually quite important. How you rank a school should also depend on how well they're preparing children in this field. We want to see more impact analysis on the kind of work that we do, so that we can be just as measurable as that headline that I told you about. It should be something about how what the impact is if a politician puts their commitment into fostering media literacy. How big a trophy can they get? That's actually going to be helpful. We need to make sure that it's not just Lie Detectors that has such great funding, that's so independent and that does not rely on the platforms. There's a lot of really wonderful initiatives out there, and unfortunately, quite a lot of them have got to go and take money from the very platforms that are perpetuating this problem. We really think that this should start to be funded by public budgets, national education budgets, regional, local education budgets. It belongs not into some weird philanthropic or even EU funding pot. It actually belongs into just the public education budget. And again, as I said, don't think that fact checking is going to solve the whole thing, and address the algorithms. And good luck for anyone taking that on. And with that, I'm open to your questions. I'm going to stop sharing. There you go.
Thanks a lot for Juliane for these wonderful insights into the work of Lie Detectors. Well, in really admirable pan-European organization caring for media literacy. Now I will give the floor to Finn because, well, he prepared the questions and will moderate the discussion. Finn, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your interesting presentation. I think we learned a lot about media literacy. And I thought a little bit to form the discussion more about this question. We start with question about the Lie Detectors, the organization itself, and then we brought it a little bit wider. And maybe we had in the first discussion for the day that we get 2 minutes rest and think about questions you came in mind, and then we bring it to you. But maybe you start first with some question about the organization itself, and then you bring us some greater questions. Yeah. It's okay for you, Juliane, to hear this?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah.
A question maybe, I don't know if everybody is fine with it.
So here's already a question. Do you need in the Zoom 1 minute or you ready? Yeah, Julia?
Yes, I have a question because we've been talking about not only saying no to media, but also saying yes. And if you are teaching children what sources to say yes to, like we have faced the problem that people don't trust media at all, and I believe that teaching children what sources to trust is neither not less important than knowing how not to trust untrustable resources. So
Yes,
do
thank you.
you teach those things?
Yes, so that's an enormously important part of the structure of what we do in the classroom. So this is what one of our board members actually calls the yin and yang of media literacy. You can't only focus on what's bad online, you also really have to talk about what's valuable and good online. One of the reasons that we work with journalists when we go into classrooms and not coaches, the coaches I think would be able to speak very easily about fact checking tools, etc. But the reason that we send journalists into classrooms that we really want them to talk about the hard graft of journalism, the unbelievable work that goes into constructing fact-based information and a fact-based report. And we actually, and Lutz will know this because he was part of this as well, we always insist that a journalist also talks about a moment when, despite all the high aspirations and ambitions, something went wrong. And the reason that we do that is because we work with, as you know, with cognitive psychologists, and there's more and more sort of emerging evidence that trust, authenticity, credibility, all of those things, all of those indicators are linked with authenticity. And authenticity also includes admissions of fallibility. There's all sorts of wonderful research papers that are out there about people who say, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that, are more credible than those who say, I think that I know the truth 100%. And so we ask the journalists to always talk about how difficult their job is and how they can get it wrong. And that way we really want to foster this understanding among the children and among the teachers that there's deliberate disinformation and manipulation on the one hand, and then on the other hand, there's journalism that doesn't always get it right? All of those of us who've been journalists all know that we make mistakes, right? That mistakes happen, but that we're still working with this bona fide intention of informing the public, and that knowing the difference between these two is actually really important and worth spending time on. So yes, it's absolutely very, very important. We cannot only be fear-mongering. That's extremely important. And we have to really make sure that we always empower the children and always give them tools. You don't only tell them, be careful, but we also say, here's how you go about it.
Yeah,
So
maybe
it means you're not only teaching children, but also teaching journalists who come to you. Like when you're instructing them how to work with children.
Yes, we teach. Yes, we train the in fact, I was just in a journalist training workshop yesterday. Yes, we train them for a full day, and then we have another couple of hours to train them to do the work online in case there's another pandemic or in case they work somewhere in a classroom that they can't actually reach physically. But yes, we train them very extensively.
Finn, there's another question from Sophia. If we want to continue with the online questions, we could...
Yeah, perfect. Continue with him. Yeah.
Okay, Sophia then.
Okay, thank you. So I'm a scout counselor and I pretty often work with children. So my question is, at what age is the best time to start talking with them about media literacy, and how is the better way to talk about that?
Yes, that's a really brilliant question. So at Lie Detectors, we start at age 10. The reason for that is that our sessions are an hour and a half long, and we talk about news because we work with journalists, right? And before children are 10, that's too much to ask, right? An hour and a half concentrating on one thing and talking about news, that's too much. By the time they're 10, they really are becoming interested in the world around them, right? It's quite extraordinary, quite how sophisticated some of their thinking is and how curious they are about the news of the things that are going on around them. However, we have had a lot of requests to visit classrooms younger than that, and I have seen So the emerging expert consensus is that this belongs into primary school, right? And there are ways of doing it, not necessarily our format, for the reasons that I've just said, but there are ways of doing it. And I've seen an amazing presentation by the University of Dortmund, in Germany, where they were doing media literacy for pre-literate children, media literacy for children that couldn't read. Okay, they were like 4 years old, and it was beautiful. It was all on the basis of emoticons. It was so good, and I thought, my God, this would also be really good for very old people, actually. So yeah, I think that across the board, if you do it right, and if you want, I can send that paper from Dortmund. I thought it was really great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Back to you, Finn.
Yeah, should we go up and collect some question here in the classroom and then you answer to several questions, maybe? Is it okay for you? Yeah.
I come in the front to let you understand me better. Hi, my name is Ronja. I was very strongly thinking about the graph you showed with the, I guess it was written general, the challenge of the generational gaps in information sources, because I mean, I got my first iPhone in 2013, and some of the sources that were listed, I didn't even know that you can inform yourself. And I was thinking about, okay, maybe younger people do have a different definition of how to inform yourself or what's information for me. So my question is, on what base you start to ensure that everybody's on the same level you are talking about? Thank you.
Someone else?
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Felix, and my question is basically how big is the problem? So meaning how many of the children actually do believe in fake news or even conspiracy theories, and how did that change in the past years?
Hey, yeah, my question is, because you also talked about that's not part of the curriculum yet, but it should be. Is it also kind of a target of yours to get the topic into the curriculum of the countries you're working with? And do you have kind of a strategy for it?
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear that question. Could I have some help? I'm so sorry, that's my hearing.
So please speak as loud as possible.
So the question is, because you mentioned that the topic is not part of the curriculum yet, but it should be. Is it not enough? And so do you have any strategies, or is it kind of a target of your organization to get a topic into the curriculum, and how are you going to do it?
Okay, I think I got that. The question is like, if it's supposed to be in the curriculum.
Yeah, and how to get it there. How to get it
there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's enough. 3 questions, and then we collect more.
Yeah, I'll answer these 3. Okay, great.
Yes.
So first of all, how can teachers, when everything is so splintered, how can we find common ground? So that's the question that we often get from teachers. If the children are in all these different places, how on earth can I talk to them about anything? Because I don't know where they are. So this is something that, well, again, the emerging expert consensus is something that's so simple when you're on the outside and so difficult when you're on the inside. And it is that teachers should be using an inquiry-led approach. That means that teachers need to be coming with questions rather than with answers. And that's really difficult because it is not in the DNA of a teacher to stand up in front of the class and say, I don't know. It's the opposite. Teachers are very used to standing up in front of the classroom and saying, I know, and I'm going to tell you. But you can't start like that because you don't know what they are worrying about and thinking about and consuming. So really what has to happen is a real shift, a real behavioral shift by the teachers to really open the conversation. And when you do open the conversation, and by the way, I can tell you that I'm not on half of these platforms, right? And neither are the journalists. They're not on TikTok sorry, they are on TikTok probably, but they're not on Twitch and Fortnite and all of these places. But they can talk about source literacy. They can talk about confirmation bias. They can talk about all sorts of things. So while the children, I'm saying children quite loosely, right? The young people might be sort of what you call digital natives, and that could be intimidating. They can click very quickly and they're very fluent switching from one to the other, but they don't necessarily know how to check whether, the veracity and the value of one source versus another source. And that's where experience and kind of knowledge of just like the broader world comes in valuably, as long as you start with the questions, even if the information sources are from different places, you can still come and have a common discussion, because the topics are the same, right? The stuff that's happening out there is trying to influence your opinions, right? And trying to make money out of your clicks, right? That's a very simple denominator that you can discuss very, very richly and very simply. So I hope that, I mean, you can talk about this for a really, really long time, but that's my short question to your answer. How big is the problem? How many children believe in this? That's very, very hard to measure because they'll never tell you. Except when we ask them to vote, we show them fakes and we ask them to vote and on whether they think something is real or not. And then you can imagine what happens. One of them will put up their hand, and then their friend perhaps will also put up their hand, and then a few other people will also think, oh, well, if they think it, then maybe I think it too, right? And that's how it works online as well, right? And what we see is that no classroom is immune. It's not like we go into those elite schools with the cool screens and everything, and they're fine. No, that's not the case. There is no classroom that's immune, but also there's no classroom that can't learn about this. And then you said, how do you get this into the curriculum? Oh God. So some schools have some countries have already done it, right? So Finland, for instance, is always at the forefront of this. And Austria recently, I think a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago, made a mandatory new subject for all schools that's called basic digital competences. Now, that's not what we advocate for. We don't see that it should be a separate subject, because what happens when it's a separate subject, there's a separate subject that touches on that in Belgium as well, right? But when a pandemic comes along and you're only teaching core competences, guess which subject gets thrown out first? That's the subject that gets thrown out first. So what our view is that every teacher, regardless of their subject area, should be able to teach this and to talk about it fluently. How to do that, it's really difficult. We see a lot of work kind of at the grassroots level, and I would count us as being there, right? The grassroots level. And then up there at the OECD level, the EU level, UNESCO level, a lot of interest there as well. And what's missing is the middle. What's missing is engagement at the national government level and local and regional. We're starting to sort of penetrate from the bottom up. We're starting to work with mayors who might have an interest in sort of creating educational priorities in their little towns. But it's a lot of work. There's an awful lot of work that still needs to go into it. The OECD is very interested in this, but its membership, some countries have simply said, we hear you, that you think this is important, but we're not interested in pursuing this. And that's a real problem.
Nice, thank you. Maybe I have a question regarding this aspect. Do you have any concrete measures or something for success? Or if not, do you have a concrete success story you can tell us, maybe, where you improved students in media literacy?
Yeah. Oh God, all the time. You want me to answer that question?
Yeah.
Is that a question? Yeah, I'd love to tell you that. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. So, for instance, I was at a school when I was testing this myself. I went to a school where they were very receptive and very welcoming, and I went. There was one teacher in particular who kept inviting me, and he taught several years. So I went 3 or 4 times. By the time I'd been in there for the 5th time, and by the way, we all kind of do the same thing, right? It's one script that we sort of stick to, more or less. By the time I was in there for the 5th time, the kids were putting up their hand going, no, 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 miss, you have to read further than the headline. You've only read the headline, you've got to look further. No, that's clickbait. And no, look at that. That's like that photo is taken out of context. And I thought, my God, why am I even here? You know? And at the end of it, the teacher came up to me and said, listen, Juliana, I have got to admit something to you. I've been watching you do this, and I think it's a good idea, so I started doing it myself. And so, you know, and they actually, in the end, they hired him to teach all the other teachers, and so that's a school we don't have to go into anymore, you know. So that can happen. Also, we do get we get anecdotal evidence of, you know, I'll hear from parents on whatever chats or something. Oh, you're the one who does lie detectors. My God, I can't say anything to my child anymore. My child is forever fact checking whether what I've just told them is true or not. So, you know, yeah, it is possible to make a difference.
Okay, but is this often the case, or are there also some students who don't got this so positive?
We don't know. I mean, there's a dark figure, right? There are the classrooms that don't invite us, right? I mean, we have massive wait lists. You know, we're right now taking bookings for February and March already. And yet there are regions where, for instance, in the eastern part of Germany, where the demand is not so high. Now, whether that is because they're just not so familiar with it, or whether it is because the teacher does not like the idea of inviting a journalist into their classroom because they think that journalists are not good people. And let's face it, there are people who think that, and there are teachers who think that. That's just something we don't know that. And we're thinking quite deeply about what we can do with that, what other trust indicators we can use. But yes, absolutely. I'm sure we're not reaching everywhere.
Yes, actually, I wanted to ask about the data as well, if there is any data to check the results, but I've got another question. You mentioned that you're currently teaching in multiple countries, and I was wondering if you saw any differences in, well, yes, if the children are, no, you're saying no already, so I guess that's the answer, but I was wondering if there
No. So this is, of course, this is the question that we ask ourselves, and we just started, and we're just growing. In fact, on Monday we've got another journalist training workshop in Warsaw with journalists coming from Krakow and different parts of Poland to get trained up so that they can go into classrooms back where they live. And this is the question that we had, and our Poland coordinator says it's exactly the same. There's no difference. There may be a difference in the social media apps that they use, you know, certainly. You know, I think that Viber is it called Viber or Viber? I never know how to pronounce it. I know that that's kind of used, and there's other platforms that are used more, and different kind of chat apps that are used. But in terms of the questions, the concerns, the worries, the generational gap, and particularly the way they respond to this, there's no difference. Amazingly.
Yeah.
It's very universal, just like this online world is universal, you know.
If it is okay, and there's room for questions from the lecturers. I have a question because I'm deeply interested in the. I have to come.
Yeah.
Oh, the same rules. So, yeah, it's Johannes for a second. I always think about the concept of misinformation, disinformation. And what I experienced in our growingly or in our polarized societies we live in is that the definition of misinformation is quite hard, because the phenomenon could be what is information for one side on the maybe political spectrum is the disinformation for the other side, and vice versa. And this maybe could be a problem if you have a mixed classroom of people with different backgrounds and so on and so on. So the definition of what is misinformation. And we have another problem of changing information into disinformation or disinformation into information over time. Rasmus Kleis-Nielsen at the end of his talk in the morning said, about the concept of misinformation, he referred to the story, for example, about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq as the beginning of this war. So what was deeply red flagged as misinformation, if you have another view at that time when it came up, and was later on, as he said, it turned into information because it wasn't true that there were any weapons, and the most trusted media reported on it as if it's true. So you have always this inner problematic bias in what is seen as information or disinformation by people. And I would really love to learn from you with what definition, for example, what examples in a classroom you work, especially are concrete, and yeah, and how to deal with this fundamental bias in the differentiation between information and disinformation when it comes to urgent topics. Thank you.
Yes, that's a really rich question. Okay, so yes, it's difficult to define. And all right, so where am I going to start with this question? So the words that we use, so when we go into a classroom, we split up our session in two sections, right? Number one, the first section is very much about disinformation, right? This is deliberate falsehoods, okay? That's what we talk about. We start very black and white, right? We start extremely simply, and we start with examples that are obviously fake, right? And that are also easy to debunk, because we want to start with the simple, right? And that's what we call disinformation, right? And that is, I don't know, let me see. There's so many examples, the Pope in the bomber jacket, or the crocodile that crept out of the sewers of Paris, or we start with very simple examples, the shark that's swimming on the highway in Texas after the hurricane, and all of these things. And we actually start with very simple examples that can be disproved for several reasons. First of all, we want to show people that you can disprove these things. We don't want to go in there with the most difficult examples first, because we'll just scare everybody, right? Number two, we work with very simple examples like these, like animals and blah, 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 not only because we're dealing with children, but also because we don't know what the political reality is of their households. We don't want to go and start talking about politics and religious tolerance and immigration policy and that kind of thing, because the teacher will be left with that problem after we leave. But we also see that you can talk about very simple and tangible and engaging and maybe fun examples with kids in a way that engages them, right? They get it. It's much more fun for them to think about, did the crocodile really climb out of the sewers in Paris, than it is to think about, what do you think about, I don't know, whatever religious issue might be the problem of the day in the polarized information world. So that's what we do in the first half, and I can talk on and on and on about with you, but I know that we have a limited amount of time. The second half is one that we've had to name really carefully, and where the translations actually are hard for us, and that is where we talk about half-truths, bias, media bias, and we address it very openly. We address it proactively. And what I said to you about the journalist having to own up to having made a mistake, this is not a typo that they're going to be talking about, right? This is actually that they got the story wrong. They were only looking at it from one perspective. Perhaps they didn't have time. Perhaps they were only sent to cover one thing. Perhaps they were told by an editor to satisfy the demands of the readership, right? And we do this in two ways. First of all, we do games with the children, with both age groups, different kinds of games where they kind of basically experience how easy it is, without lying, to tell a half-truth, to tell a story that's actually not 100% true to the complexity of it. And that's incredibly important. Can they understand how easy it is just to tell a partial story, because they weren't given the time by us, or because they wanted to please the other children and make them laugh, or whatever it might be, right? And then from that, we segue into the story by the journalist talking about this, because the journalist must acknowledge how difficult that is. We have to be proactive in doing that. And that, by the way, it does mean that some journalists don't wish to work with us, especially in a country like Germany, where the culture comes very much from post-war, the desire to correct the thinking of the population. The journalists are smarter. They know they're going to correct the thinking. It's sometimes difficult, and not pointing any fingers. We're extremely, extremely active in Germany, but I do also see that it's difficult in some journalistic cultures to actually come out and say that, yeah, my editor makes me write this stuff that goes into this direction, But when they do, that you can, by the way, when that conversation happens, the intensity in the classroom is very high. Like, it's very silent, and they listen because they're not used to having an adult come and talk about getting it wrong, making mistakes. It makes a huge impression. And by the way, when you said, do you have success stories? For me, a success stories, even when we read the questionnaires at the end that the kids fill out by hand, one of the questions that we put to them is, what surprised you most about this visit? And the amount of times that the children say, I have never spoken so honestly with an adult, or that somebody would come and talk like that about their profession, or I had no idea how complicated it is to be a journalist. Each one of those things is a success story, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe Lutz, I mean, I know that Lutz has been into classrooms, and he also did this, by the way. So.
I did so, and it was good.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions here in the classroom or online? Okay, then I have a few questions. Maybe. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay. First question came up to me is, how long do you stay in the class, or what do you do to ensure that educators and schools are equipped to continue fostering media literacy skills after lie detectors was in the school? This was the first question. And the second question was, it is the rise of AI and pictures. I don't know if you can see this. Really good pictures, but obviously here's the fake picture come up. And so this is called deepfake, I think. Maybe you can tell us more about the problem of deepfake. The root problem, we discussed it until now. And what do you do against this in the class? Yes. And maybe a third question, then you can wrap up. Many people of us maybe know the confirmation bias, where individuals just consume those information they already know and got in a bubble. And we already heard, I think, all about the bubble on platforms, and that algorithms would foster it. And even today, Rasmus Nielsen told us that he is not so sure that here, take the example of Instagram, that your algorithm really strengthened this problem, but she said that the algorithm sometimes even open up the bubble to look how to get more information about your incentives and so on. And maybe you can give us your opinion about information bias and how algorithms and platform foster it or don't foster it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, great. Lovely. They're great. So number one, how do you give teachers material so that they can carry on the work? You're absolutely right that in 90 minutes, we can't solve the problem, right? But we can give impulse sessions that will ignite the curiosity of the children and show the teachers. And by the way, we ask the teachers to do zero preparation, right? And some of the teachers invite us only so that they can have a cup of coffee and a bit of a break, right? Because being a teacher is really hard work, right? And often they're like, oh, ignore me, I'm just sitting in the back. And they're the ones that come up to the front afterwards and they say, oh my God, why are all the kids on all of these platforms, and how come they fall for these fakes, and what can I do, right? That's really what we want to achieve, right? That they can see that it is relevant to their children in their own classroom, and that they can see that it doesn't have to be scary to talk about it. You can talk about it in very, very simple terms, and then we give them materials. Some of these materials we make ourselves. We're not that great at making these. We made some during the pandemic. I kind of like them, but to be honest, there's amazing materials out there in every country and in every language. And then we've got like a QR code that we give to the teachers, and then we just hope that they actually do something about it. There's nothing that we can do to force them. We're kind of thinking about doing a program where those teachers to kind of incentivize them to do more and more and more. But that's still in the beginning phases. So I hope that answers your first question. Deep fakes, yeah, it's a problem. And they're getting better and better. So we've just been thinking about how to talk to teachers about deep fakes, because teachers are terrified about AI, right? And one of the few things that we've come up with, first of all, because it's journalists, we think, and again, this is like beginning thinking, right? We've been quite slow to do anything about AI because it's developing so fast. You know, as soon as you develop something and train the journalists on how to talk about it, it will have changed, right? So the journalists do talk about the difference between AI and generative AI, right? They'll talk about what this means to their newsroom, right? And if they can, they're supposed to also talk about the guidelines that their newsroom has on using AI or not using AI, right? Again, to kind of say, right, whatever you're getting out there online could be on your whatever, your TikTok feed or whatever, it could be AI generated. If it's coming from a journalist, if it's coming from Nine Newsroom, I can tell you that our guidelines are like this, and I'm not allowed to do this, and I'm not allowed to do that. But again, that's also really in its infancy, because unfortunately, a lot of newsrooms don't actually have guidelines on how to use AI, or the journalists don't know about that. So this is kind of a work in progress for us. But I have to tell you that, yeah, we're worried about deepfakes, of course. I know of one journalist who actually actively recommends to the children to consume more text than images, because AI is very focused on video and picture content. And that is definitely the direction of travel for news consumption. Very much into, you saw the graph, right? The red line, the orange lines were very much in the visual, in the visual part of the graphic. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. And then your third question was on information bias. What do you do on information bias? Okay, so this is why, if I was starting lie detectors again, I wouldn't only do news literacy. And because we work with journalists, of course, it's going to be more about the news and the content, right? Because this is what journalists can organically talk about. I would also design it to have a very large algorithm literacy component, because there's more and more scientific evidence from real scientific experiments that shows that if you understand that you have preferences and biases and prejudices, if you understand that, and if you understand that the social media platforms know about them, right? And by the way, with increasing speed because of AI, and that you're therefore receiving very kind of one-sided information that might not be false, right? But it's one-sided. You're getting one-sided information that is driving you further and further to one side of a debate. If you know all of these things, you're better able to resist the polarizing effect of the information that you're getting. If you see, whatever, like I love cats and I hate dogs or something like that, and you get all of this anti-dog stuff, if you understand this, that there's a reason why you're getting it, you're more able to resist the messaging. See what I mean? And so I really think that algorithm literacy is a very, very big and necessary and important component of this digital media literacy that we're talking about. to understand, because that allows you to talk about confirmation bias also in a way that doesn't make you too guilty. It makes the platforms guilty. So perhaps it's easier to talk about.
Okay, thank you. So you say algorithms do strengthen the problem of confirmation bias. Get it right?
Oh, I just missed part of your question.
So you say, just to get it right, do you say algorithms do strengthen the problem of confirmation bias? Okay, nice.
Yes, of course, because because of the preference settings, right? And the preference settings are more and more like the preference settings that you might enter yourself, but also preference indicators that used to be the emoticons that you use, but increasingly they are AI generated or AI recognized preference settings, how long you spend on a website, how quickly you click through, what you hesitate on, You don't have to do very much for a social media platform to understand what you like and don't like.
Okay.
Yes, and then feed you more of it. Yeah.
I think in the Zoom room, are 2 questions. Maybe first Julia and then Lutz. You bring the questions.
Yes, I have a really small question because we were talking about like children are alone in some of social media. Like there is lack of moderation from adults. Is that meaning that children are consuming information that's been like filtered, like is their target auditorium are children, or is there some content on these platforms related to adults that they are not supposed to consume, but they still do because they lack of moderation? Is there any of those concerns?
Okay. So thank you for that. So again, when we're talking about this, I shouldn't necessarily be talking about children. There is a generational divide, right? And I think about it very much because of the work that we do in terms of teachers as being the adults and then children, but it's not quite that it's just children. Think about this, the QAnon theory, right? The QAnon conspiracy theory, which says that the Democrat Party in the United States is run by satanic pedophiles, right? And that they sacrifice children and things like that. Yes, that was born. And by the way, which is getting people elected into Congress, right? Who believe this stuff, right? That was born on a gaming platform. I can't remember which one, but it was born on a gaming platform and eventually jumped onto Twitter as it was at the time, right? So this is where there's definitely not child-friendly content, but this is where children are, right? Also I can't remember what his name was, the soldier in the United States who was sharing secrets. He was also doing it on a gaming platform. And what was the other part of your question? No, hold on. What was the other part of your question?
Like, is there any concern that there are children that are targeted auditorium?
Yes. Yes. So yes. Yes. And for instance, one of the posts that made me start Lie Detectors was a post that was being shared among 13-year-olds, and it was very targeted at 13-year-olds. It was a Russian bot, a Russian troll that was disseminating malinformation, I would call it, about Hillary Clinton. And that was written, and I remember reading it, and it was so outrageous that's one of the reasons that made me start Lie Detectors. And yes, that was very much written for children. I can't tell you the number of those kind of posts because again, they're traveling in encrypted spaces and private chat rooms. But that was a post that was traveling around, that was making the rounds in a classroom of 13-year-old children, and I remember looking at it. It was an Instagram post, and there were like hundreds of likes, all from children.
Juliane, I would like to refer back to what Johannes already mentioned. That was the input that Rasmus Kleis-Nielsen gave today. And he was talking about the big platforms, and he was talking about the research on the platforms. And he said, and well, I put it roughly, he said the platforms also provide opportunities in that regard, that marginalized groups can raise their voices and can participate in the public discourse. That was one. And the other thing that he mentioned was that filter bubbles hardly exist. Well, he was telling us that the algorithms also tend to give you content that is on the edge of what you want to know, and that could also enhance your horizon or drive your understanding of a problem into a broader perspective, right? That was what he said. And you were contradicting this in your input, because you said that the platforms are the drivers of disinformation. So yeah, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to also talk about this contradiction.
Thank you. No, that's important. I would say the platforms are currently the drivers of disinformation, and there's an awfully high financial incentives to carry on doing that. I can also tell you that Twitter used to be a little bit of a poster child of how to do things well. That there is no doubt that algorithms can be used for positive ends as well. Absolutely. They just aren't in a majority of cases at the moment. But I can tell you, I don't know whether you remember this, but there was a time on Twitter where if you tried to share something, it would stop you. Twitter would stop you and say, "Are you sure you want to share this post? Because we noticed you've only read the headline. Are you sure you know what you're sharing?" Right? And that's an incredibly simple piece of software programming, you know? That's not hard at all, but that's stopped. Because engagement is still the non plus ultra in in a lot of these platforms for very obvious reasons. And engagement requires keeping people fed with things that they like and things that they know that you want to go to somewhere where you know what you're going to get. Of course, so yes, the algorithms can be a force for good, but I would I would I would posit that currently that's not the majority of the algorithms. What else did you say? Filter bubbles, preferences. Of course, preferences are convenient. Yes. And actually, what we're actually asking people to do is to get out of their convenient space. That's also difficult. And there's all sorts of questions about what you could do. Could you use a plugin that would force you to also consume news or content that doesn't automatically interest you? Perhaps, yes. What did you filter bubbles, preferences, algorithms? Have I addressed it a little bit?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Oh, yes, and by the way, you said, I'm so sorry, you said you began by saying that, the platforms give voice to marginalized community. Of course they do. Of course they do. The online content is not only bad, of course not, but you have to stop and tell the difference.
Finn?
Yeah, here's another question from Amelie.
Hi, I'm Amelie. I was wondering if, because you told us earlier that in Eastern Germany it was kind of hard, or like schools don't invite you to come over and do your training. And I was wondering also earlier if you have like kind of a diverse range of schools normally in your program, like if you keep this example out, like are there, because in Germany we have like this the separation right between like gymnasium and Realschule and so on. And is it like pretty diverse, or do you feel like you kind of only get an invitation from like schools which are kind of already interested in this topic?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a great question. So yes, when we go to a new, so we cover the diversity, and we do that very deliberately. When we go into a new area, we actually map. We use Google Maps. See, Google's not all bad. We use Google Maps to really see all of the schools, and then we look at what are the, in Germany, Hauptschule, Realschule, Gymnasium, right? These are the different kind of levels of schools and different types of schools, and then we make sure that we have a complete a real balance of these different kinds of schools. We do not exclude gymnasium, and the journalists, some of them actually prefer to go to, there's some, I don't know, for instance, in Cologne, there's an awful lot of schools right in this inner city that have massive classroom sizes. They're really overrun. It's very, these are real kind of well, they're schools that are difficult to run because the number of children is very, very high. The language ability is very diverse. You can't always think that you're going into a classroom where everybody speaks fluent German, right? But the journalists keep going there. It's not that they don't enjoy going there. They say the questions are similar. If anything, one of our journalists, his name is Michael Strempel. He used to be the head of Morgenmagazin for ARD. And he's one of the people who works with us. And he says, I like going into the Hauptschulen and Realschulen best because the teachers are so grateful when we're finally there, because they say, God, finally somebody has something for us. So yes, we try to do that. And then I do still have that question of like, what about the schools that don't invite us? Are we less prolific in Saxony-Anhalt, Thuringia, because we're just not working hard enough at it, or because we need a big communications drive? Maybe they don't know about us, or is it in fact that they know about us and don't necessarily want to invite us? And I just don't know the answer.
Is there time for another quick question, or are we running out of time?
Is there time for another question? Yeah.
It's again me.
I think we have 5 minutes left. Then Juliane had joined us then for 90 minutes. Originally, I have invited her for 1 hour. So I'm happy that she already spent 90 minutes with us. But,
I have it in my calendar as 1.5 hours, Lutz.
That's great. But yeah, that means that we have another question.
Okay, very quickly. I try to build bridges to the other seminar sessions we have. And one session will be about media ownership and media capture. And this is an important part of what we are doing here. And in preparation of that, we have the phenomenon, and I would really like to learn from you how you deal with teaching kids the problematic coming out of that. More and more countries in Germany have the problem of media capture, where legacy media, very renowned media, are captured by states, by the state, or by oligarchs, or by other interest groups, and which have influence on the news, on what is reported about in what way. And disinformation or misinformation is often sometimes we acknowledge as something coming from dark channels or from somewhere in the net, and is distributed by without the bottleneck of a highly renowned media brand or media or newsroom or whatever. And more we have the problem that misinformation or deeply biased information is coming out of formerly really reliable, trustful, independent media, which are captured by forces which are instrumentalizing this media for their propaganda. So how to explain pupils or students here that media you are used to trust could be changed into something you shouldn't maybe trust blindfolded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. So that's our message anyway, that you shouldn't. It's not that we're trying to make the children distrust everything, but we are telling them that when it comes to very important subjects, they need to look at more than just one source, right? Because even the wonderful, brilliant, carefully chosen, high quality, ethical, professional journalists that we send into classrooms make mistakes, right? So the question, the message is always read a little bit more, take a little bit more time before you make it before you form an opinion that could be irreversible. Like really take time in putting together your worldview. You talked about media ownership. I don't know whether you know, there's an initiative that was started by Reporters Without Borders and is being carried forward by, I think it was called the Lutz or Max or any of you. Do you know what it's called? It's being done by Olaf Steenfahrt. It's a real
Olaf
big
Steenfahrt, and it's the
Media
media ownership monitor.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
ownership monitor.
Yes, now and the thing of media ownership and
the name?
media and media.
yes.
Oh,
Yeah. You find it in the magazine. Yeah.
We wondered about the name.
yes, you've got it, right? You got it. So that's very interesting that, of course, there's a huge issue, right? And media ownership is enormously important to know about. And interestingly, in the European Media Freedom Act, there was a lot of talk about inserting clauses that would have obliged media organizations to divulge where their funding comes from, right? And actually, it was the media organizations that actually didn't want to do it, right? I might be oversimplifying, okay? But that was certainly one theme of the conversations. And so that's, yes, it's tremendously important. There's also a very interesting graphic which was made by a non-journalist, which kind of places American media along a left to right axis. I don't know if you've seen it. It's really great. It's got like the Associated Press and Reuters in the middle, and then everything else on the sides, and then up and down. I can't remember what the y-axis is, but yes, I mean that's obviously an issue, and also a reason why it's important to have journalists talk about this, right? Because everyone who's a journalist knows that by now your boss can see how many people have clicked on your article or on your broadcast piece or on your radio piece or on your podcast, whatever it might be, right? And if not enough people click on it, then you're going to be in trouble. And so you'd better start writing stuff that's clickable. And that's very problematic. And clickable things are the things that your readers like and enjoy. So you're back in the confirmation bias bubble. You're going straight in there. And these are all things that you need to absolutely think about and talk about. And all the need, yes, it's absolutely even more of a need for more journalism, more somehow a better business model for journalism. And I would say for journalists to do the kind of work that they do with us, because that is indirectly creating more trust in journalism and perhaps eventually more demand for quality journalism. Ideally.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juliane, very much for ending also on this positive note and on this perspective. Thank you very much, Finn, for leading the discussion and for preparing the questions. It was really, really, really interesting. Thank you for all your insights, and thank you a lot for your work that you do in the classrooms. I guess we all think that is super, super necessary and super valuable. Thank you, Juliane, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the invitation and for all the super questions. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Juliane. Bye.
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 Very nice.